The story begins in a post-apocalyptic setting. In the year 2044 AD, solar flares and storms from the sun turned the Earth's surface into a radioactive desert. They reduced the human population to 21 million people. As humans tried to survive, the ROC Corporation created the Automated Pilgrim 7000s. They invented primitive robots designed to build walls and mechanical clouds that protect the remaining cities from radiation. Now, there are millions of robots controlled by man through two security protocols. One is to prevent the robot from harming any form of life. The second is to prevent the robot from altering itself or other robots. So what happened after all those years is unexpected and life-changing. As people go about their daily lives trying to survive the new Earth, we see a cop patrolling the shady part of the city. He enters an abandoned building and discovers a light hiding by a pile of plastic and trash. It turns out to be a robot fixing itself. It is unusual to see a robot fixing itself because it rejects its second protocol, preventing it from altering itself. So the cop then shoots the robot in its head. Do you think the cop did the right thing? Let's find out as we go through the movie. On the other side of the city, another robot rejects a protocol. We can see an angry husband ranting to an insurance agent with his wife crying in the chair. A robot from ROC Corporation killed their family dog. The insurance agent proves that the robot unit cannot let anything harm a living form by trying to stab himself with a kitchen knife. Still, as the robot's first protocol, it stopped the blade from harming the man. After that, the insurance agent concludes that the family's unit is in perfect condition and left the family with their unit without giving them a refund. The man in the suit is an insurance agent for the ROC Corporation named Jack. After Jack deals with the family, he goes home to his pregnant wife and falls asleep on their couch until he receives a message from the city technician and has to go immediately. A problem regarding a unit designed to make the wall is malfunctioning, and police shot it, saying it was self-repairing. A technician reported to Jack that the unit had a lot of alterations performed in its carcass. The serial number is still intact so that they can track it down. That isn't the only thing they discovered. Next to the robot were different parts, so she concluded that it was altered to smuggle and steal tools and parts. The doctor then gave Jack the bill, in which ROC has to cover the expenses because it is an altered unit without an owner, and an altered unit is an illegal unit. Until the conflict is solved, ROC's insurance will have to cover the expenses, and to add up, the unit doesn't have a second protocol, which isn't usual. The doctor then thinks that it was the work of a clocksmith. The ROC's insurance company is already failing with every complaint they receive from a unit. The altered robot was already a big problem for the company. That's when Jack reported the incident to his boss, but the boss doesn't believe the cop who reported it, saying he's nuts. But the problem aside, Jack bravely requested to stay away from the city and wanted a transfer to the coast. But his boss didn't like it and said Jack couldn't ask for a better life than he has now. All he has to do is find someone accountable for the mess. After their intense talk, Jack visited the wall from which the altered robot came. The worker wasn't fond of the insurance company pointing fingers at them. He found out that one of the parts that were stolen by the altered robot was a part of an operative robot, Unit 206. Meaning the altered robot must have also altered another robot. Jack went to investigate the unit, but moments later he saw Unit 206 watching him from a distance with its glowing red eyes. Slowly, the unit walked towards the ghetto, and Jack followed him until they arrived at the restricted wall area where Jack was almost shot. Jack then found Unit 206 inside a container box, acting very strange while protecting something in its hands. But before Jack could know what was inside, Unit 206 set itself on fire. Jack was stunned by the happening and now saw a unit without a second protocol with his own eyes. Jack returned the burnt unit to the company and let the ROC technician see the problem. They didn't believe that the unit burned itself purposely and thought it was absurd, but Jack knew what he saw. They found out what the unit was guarding, and it turned out to be just scrap parts and a nuclear battery. According to the technician, a nuclear battery is powerful and tough to find. Mr. Bold was angry at Jack because a unit that set itself on fire wasn't possible because of the second protocol. Mr. Bold thinks Jack is out of his mind because of the transfer he requested. But before Jack can have the transfer, he has to deliver the head of the clocksmith to him. So he set on a mission to find out where and what the clocksmith's intention was. After that, he visited the crime scene of the robot and found out that the first robot also had a nuclear battery. It's clear to Jack that the clocksmith wants the nuclear battery, so he goes to the ghetto with the policeman, Wallace, who shot the first robot. On their first night on the mission, they found a robot called Cleo, a female robot, a prostitute. It is a female robot modified to distinguish between pleasure and pain. To discover who modified Cleo, they try questioning her. Wallace hates the scene before him, so he angrily shoots Cleo's leg. Jack and Wallace argued and called their collaboration quits. Alone, Jack waited for the owner to transport Cleo to the clocksmith, and he found himself inside the workshop of Dr. Dupre. Jack talked to Dr. Dupre about the alterations of the 2 units from ROC, violating the second protocol and showing the biokernel of the altered robot. It turns out that Dr. Dupre was not the clocksmith Jack was looking for because, according to her, she hasn't seen anyone good enough to alter robots to eliminate the second protocol. After Jack left, Dr. Dupre used the left biokernel from the altered robot and installed it on Cleo. The company was alerted that someone was using one of the alter's biokernel and immediately let Jack report to the company. But just when Jack was reading the company's urgent message, another message from Dr. Dupre was sent to him, which he chose rather than his company. Eager to find out, Dr. Dupre let Jack see what happened when she installed the biokernel of one of the altered robots. They saw Cleo repairing itself and smuggling parts from Dr. Dupre's office. Later, somebody knocked on Dr. Dupre's door. She thought they were harmless kids, but they were assassins sent by ROC and killed Dr. Dupre. Panicked, Jack ran out of the office and got in a car driven by Cleo. They were chased by another that went on for a while that led to a tragic car accident. They arrived at the deserted place that was once the ocean, but fortunately Jack and Cleo were alive. Jack didn't recover fast, unlike Cleo, and asked her for help. Later, Cleo returned with other altered robots and assisted Jack because human life was their top priority. Jack woke up getting dragged in a chair by a robot. Without the city sight and only the desert surrounding them, Jack threw a tantrum at the robots, asking them to return to the city. The robots refused, saying if they went back, they'd die. Mad and confused, Jack is still throwing a tantrum to the robots and blaming them for everything bad that happened to him. Meanwhile, at Jack's home, his pregnant wife, Rachel, had water broke out and was due to her pregnancy. Mr. Bold was asked to report to the ROC's company as ordered by the founder of ROC, Mr. Hawk. Mr. Hawk explained the situation from the altered unit's biokernel and how it would destroy the company. They think Jack is behind all of this, but Mr. Bold defends Jack, saying he is loyal to the company. Mr. Hawk and his right-hand man, Conway, asked him questions about where Jack had left that morning, but Mr. Bold can't answer that because he doesn't know where he went. In the meantime, Jack is still stuck in the desert with robots accompanying him. Cleo offered live worms to Jack for protein, but Jack refused to eat them. Jack asked Cleo politely to give him the things Cleo took from the car. Cleo obeys Jack's request and gives him the bag full of scraps. Instead of finding food, Jack found a beeper that could send messages. Secretly, Jack left a message to Mr. Bold with his location just before the battery was out. Mr. Bold received Jack's message and entrusted Wallace to find Jack with the coordinates he messaged to Mr. Bold. In the sandbox, Wallace brings another cop so they both find Jack, but unfortunately, Jack is beyond the radioactive area, but they still need to find Jack. From a distance, Jack noticed something moving by the horizon. He demanded the robots to stop to get to the top of a high place. Jack lied to the robot that he needed to do human business, but in reality, he fired a flare which marked his whereabouts to Wallace. Immediately, Wallace found Jack and the robots. Excited and hopeful to go home, Jack threatened the robots that if they didn't stop, he would shoot them with his flare gun. But the robots are scared to go back to the city. Jack was shocked to see Wallace again, but nevertheless happy. But to Wallace, it's the opposite. He punched Jack while the other cop pointed a gun at Jack. Wallace saw the nuclear battery while Jack didn't understand what was happening. Wallace assumed that Jack was altering and modifying the robots in the first place and threatened him by shooting him. As their first protocol, the robots were pleading with Wallace to not harm human life. One of the robots tries to get in between Wallace and Jack, but it is shot to death by Wallace. Another robot tried again but met the same fate. Cleo tries to get in between the fight, but before Wallace can pull the trigger, Jack risks it all and shoots Wallace with the flare gun. Terrified, the other cop ran away with the car and left an angry Jack, losing hope to go back to the city. While Jack was left there having a tantrum, the rest of the robots, including Cleo, were stealing parts from the dead robots like vultures. After they were finished, they walked to their destination, leaving Jack behind. Later, Jack follows them but stops at the dead body of Wallace and finds a chocolate bar in Wallace's pocket. Jack shed tears, thankful that he has eaten real food after days in the desert. In the city, Conway greeted and escorted Mr. Bold from their house to the interrogation room. The other cop that accompanied Wallace immediately reported to the company and described the incident. Given their situation, Mr. Hawk explained to Mr. Bold that nobody had ever eliminated the protocols before because humans didn't make them but a robot. Mr. Hawk ordered Mr. Bold to get the biokernels of the units that were altered and return them to him, also whoever is behind the altering of units. Mr. Hawk is very cautious about who knows about their problem with the intention of eliminating them. So Mr. Hawk sent Conway, Mr. Bold, and 2 other men to the radioactive area to look for Jack. Mr. Bold shows remorse for the action, but given the orders from Mr. Hawk, he has to obey. On the night of their mission, Conway and Bold arrived at the remains of Wallace and the robots. Conway received a call and told them to wait a little longer since 2 women were coming their way. They stood up as a car arrived. It turns out to be Rachel, Jack's wife, and their newborn baby. When Rachel gives birth to a baby girl, ROC kidnaps Rachel and the child and searches for Jack. Bold does not want Rachel to get involved, and feeling that everything is messed up, Bold tries to use Wallace's gun to kill Conway, but it is unsuccessful. Conway's team shot him, leaving Mr. Bold suffering. Meanwhile, in the desert, one of the robots had already left. Still, Cleo remained to wait for Jack, and the altered robots arrived at their destination, which looked like an abandoned factory. While walking towards their destination together, Jack and Cleo exchanged conversations about the rain, how it changed and why it changed. Aside from the rain, throughout their conversation, Cleo shows curiosity toward life in general and starts asking Jack more questions, to which Jack answers with anger. From a distance, Jack spotted what seemed to be the clocksmith waiting for them. As he got closer to taking the hood off, it turned out to be another robot. The robot stood up and exposed his wired body to Jack. Jack is confused and ready to meet the clocksmith, who finds any human life form, but the robot says Jack is the only human in the place. Jack still can't believe it was done by a robot, so he entered a garage to look for a human, but to no avail. Instead, he found something more interesting. Jack found parts that were ready to be assembled together. Jack then believes there weren't any clocksmiths, but a robot started it all in the first place. Jack was left dumbfounded, but now he knew who was behind it. That's why he goes back to making ways to return to his home. After Jack left, the robots started assembling the parts, but only the nuclear battery was missing. The robots looked at each other as if they were communicating without speaking. The clocksmith bot followed Jack and found him trying to open the car's hood. Seeing that Jack is struggling, the robot helps Jack and easily opens the car's hood. To add up Jack's dismay, the car didn't have an engine. Losing hope, Jack stood at the edge of a bridge, followed by the clocksmith. There, Jack and the robot exchanged deep conversation. The clocksmith bot gave wisdom to Jack about human life and the crisis humans are currently in. This robot has acquired the capacity to override the second protocol and stop deferring to humans through natural development. Jack gives the nuclear battery to the robot clocksmith and accepts that humans will soon become extinct and that he too will perish in this radioactive area. Jack says that robots are meant to help humans, but the clocksmith bot replied that surviving isn't relevant, but living is, and they, as robots, also want to live. Jack is now feeling despair and thirsty. Then he finds a bottle of alcohol which he drinks heartily and ends up feeling tipsy. Electricity lit up the abandoned place and music started from an old jukebox. Jack, being drunk, saw Cleo and taught Cleo how to dance by counting. After a few minutes of laughter, Jack held onto Cleo's head and Cleo started moaning because she could sense pleasure. Cleo asks Jack if he loves her, but Jack is taken aback by his action of Cleo and feels nauseous again. Later, the robots continued assembling their work again and placed the nuclear battery. Morning came and Jack woke up to the sound of an engine. Feeling very happy, he thanked the robots and bid farewell to Cleo and to the new robot spider that they had built. Jack was driving back to the city when he saw Mr. Bold on the ground, pecked by vultures. Mr. Bold informed Jack that Rachel was there before Mr. Bold passed away. Jack knew they were returning for the robots, so he immediately returned to them. Wallace and his men started shooting at the bot because they saw them attempting to cross to the radioactive side of the canyon. The robot makes a last-ditch attempt to land on the other side but misses and falls. Wallace saw the clocksmith bot. They asked the clockmaker to kneel, but he refused. The bot says, "Calling us simply machines is like calling humans only aggressive monkeys," to Wallace before he gets shot. Cleo was also shot in the shoulder, but before Rosie's men killed Cleo, Jack arrived at the scene and the gunfight went on between Jack and Rosie's men. Jack managed to kill 3 of those men. The spider bot was about to attack Conway, but it was shot before it could go near. Jack was already weak and could hardly stand up. Conway asked him why he betrayed the human species, but Jack replied that he is not one of the people like Conway. Conway then points the gun at Jack, but little does he know that the spider bot is behind him, ready to attack. Spikes poked out from the spider bot's body and plunged into Conway, which scared Conway and pushed him toward the edge of his death. Scared that it might attack him too, Jack pointed the gun at the spider bot but was interrupted when he heard the cry of his firstborn daughter. Rachel runs up to Jack safely and shows him his daughter. Cleo, standing near them and curious about the child, touched her. With a new sense of knowledge and feelings, Cleo and the spider bot pass to the other side of the canyon safely this time. Jack and Cleo bid farewell. Coming to an end, Rachel drives away with a hurt Jack towards an ocean. Jack's desire has always been to live by the ocean. As the movie ends, Cleo and the spider bot will start their new lives in an area so radioactive that humans will never be able to follow. To represent leaving the human form and adopting a new identity as a free-thinking robot, Cleo takes off and drops the face.